movie ever!
How many fish movies have you seen?
Don't ask questions you don't want answers to.
Yeah. How much are we charging for rent again?
Not enough.
Last year, director Guillermo Del Toro made The Shape of Water, and it won like a bunch of awards or something or whatever, and it's supposed to be like this big deal, I'm told. It's a good movie. A little...
Does he have a...
different. Still a good movie. The man has made a career out of his fetish for insects and clockwork and monsters and unborn things. That's not me insulting him, that's a quote. He had almost complete control over Shape of Water, which is a far cry from 20 years ago in his first big studio movie, Mimic. Mimic is based on a Donald Wollheim short story, and I mean short. To put into perspective, I spent weeks trying to find this story. I own library cards for 2 different counties. Nothing. I spent an hour in a bookstore with the manager and my poor girlfriend was dragged along. Eventually we found this monstrosity. All this work I get? 4 pages. There is literally more letters in the word short than there are pages in this story. Originally published in an issue of Astonishing Stories in 1942, Mimic is about the arrogance of mankind, a breakdown on the false idea that humans are the master of the world, when in reality we truly are in some ways smaller than the smallest microbe. As far as the universe is concerned, it's about bugs. It's about giant bugs in New York that mimic people in the city. I'm technically spoiling a 75-year-old short story from a pulp magazine, but Wollheim gives it away. When you spend half a page talking about the human ego, a page and a half talking about insect mimicry, then talk about this mysterious man in a black trench coat, it's not exactly hard to figure out. Originally set to be a 30-minute short, the studio bumped the movie up to full length. To be an hour and a half long, a lot needed to be added. Although set in the 1990s, the movie starts with introducing a disease carried by cockroaches that has a similar effect to the polio epidemic of the 1940s and 50s, and the first scenes really give off that feeling in the hospitals. The origin of the bugs were also changed between the two. In the movie, the bugs were genetically made through splicing the DNA of several different insects to be an invasive species and predator to the cockroaches in the city. With a short lifespan, the bugs were able to reproduce and evolve through thousands of generations in the span of 3 years. The short story ends with the reveal that the man in the trench coat is a species of beetle that naturally adapted to mimic the look and behavior of a human, when it's also revealed that other animals in the story have also adapted to camouflage the rooftops of the buildings. The concrete jungle of the city had started to turn into an actual jungle. That's an interesting concept, especially since a much more realistic version of these adaptations are happening around the world right now. Crows are beginning to use cars to crack open nuts, stray dogs in Russia learned to use the subway system, and gorillas in Rwanda learned how to dismantle poacher traps. But who cares about animal development? I want to see a cool bug monster. It doesn't take long, but like most of Del Toro's movies, the monsters aren't supposed to simply be monsters. The movie was originally conceived to follow the main themes of the short story. The movie was going to have much more focus on religion and explaining that humans are losing their dominance on the world. There was one side plot where Dr. Tyler is having trouble getting pregnant, all the while these bugs she created are breeding like mad in the sewers. The age of man has been taken over in part because of their arrogance, thinking they can control the world. Man has been abandoned and the insect will soon be the dominant species of the world. It's really a terrifying idea when you think about it. Bug Monster! Bug Monster! Oh man, just look at this thing. When the mandibles come apart and the face is all blah 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 blah, we're gonna eat you. And then it kills these guys and it's all, be a man! F***ing awesome. Who cares about socio-religious ideals of philosophy and natural conservationism? Yes to everything about this thing, yes!
Have we blown your mind, sir?
The mimics in the movie had a much more realistic design. You can tell that Del Toro and the creature designers took a lot of care in making the monsters have somewhat of a realistic approach to how these bugs are able to grow and operate at this size.
Peter, these are lungs.
Biology 101. Insects don't have lungs. It's what limits their size.
They have mandibles that form to make a mask, and their wings fold over to cover the body, looking like a trench coat. In the middle of the day, the animal would be obvious, but in the shadows of the subway, it could be mistaken from a distance. This is as opposed to the mimic in the story, where the human face was the actual face, and it was able to walk up to a deli clerk and actually buy food without anyone noticing, except for women. According to the book, since the beetle was a female bug mimicking a man, a woman would notice the disguise because of instinctive feminine jealousy. Penis envy. The bug was afraid of women because of penis envy.
The female homosexual has never recovered from her anger over not having the penis. She wishes to avenge her perceived castration by taking another female as her sexual object.
You're kidding me, right?
Despite fighting back and forth between Del Toro and the studio, Mimic came out well, despite Del Toro originally disowning the movie. There was a director's cut made that allowed him to add what he could manage to salvage to make Mimic how he wanted it to be, as close as possible. A little bit is added to drive home the original themes that wanted to be explored, and the color of the film went from very dark to blues and ambers. It's the better of the two. Donald Wollheim has admitted he wasn't a great author. His place in history is much more through the business side of things. Wollheim and Del Toro started as many sci-fi writers and artists start, as a fan. He was part of the Futurians, a short-lived sci-fi fan club that consisted of some of the most influential writers in the mid-20th century. Here, with the Futurians, he helped organize one of the first ever sci-fi conventions. He published his stories under Hugo Gernsback's magazines. Gernsback, who the Hugo Award is named after, ran some shady publishing practices and found himself in several lawsuits over the years with authors demanding payment that was promised. By 1940, Wollheim found himself in the pulp magazine business more as an editor and publisher now than as an author, working on small publishings and introducing the idea of the mass market paperback books. This brought him into working for Ace Books, where he introduced science fiction to the company in 1953. He published the first works of Philip K. Dick and William S. Burroughs, who was a huge influence on the beatnik generation. In my Hobbit video, I mentioned the legal battles over the American publishing rights for The Lord of the Rings. Wollheim had a hand in that. Not being a fantasy fan himself, in 1964 he called Professor Tolkien asking about the idea of publishing The Lord of the Rings as Ace paperbacks. Tolkien replied that he would never allow his great works to appear in such a degenerate a form as the paperback book. Well then, discovering a loophole by the original publisher of the Ring books, Hoyt and Mifflin, and maybe taking a page from Gernsback practices, Wollheim published the books anyway, and they were popular. Eventually, Tolkien authorized an official paperback edition, and Ace Books did pay back the Tolkien estate for royalties for the sales on the books. By 1971, Ace Books were headed by a new management that Wollheim disagreed with, eventually founding his own publishing company, DAW Books, if you've seen the logo and ever wondered what it stood for. Donald Wollheim is remembered less as an author, but as one of the forefathers of mass paperback publishings. Today, DAW is operated by Wollheim's daughter Elizabeth, who won the Hugo Award herself in 2012, succeeding where her father tried to. He always wanted to win a Hugo Award but never did before he died. This is C.B. Smith, and thanks for taking a page. Bug monster, bug monster, bug monster, bug monster.